Welcome back, listeners. Ready to dive deep into a new topic? Today, we're exploring the world of Buddhism.
Excited to break it down.
We'll be drawing insights from El Buddhismo to illuminate the core beliefs and practices that define this ancient tradition, and who better to guide us than our expert?
Happy to be here. Buddhism is truly a rich tapestry of philosophy and practice. It's been a source of inspiration and guidance for countless individuals across cultures and centuries.
It's a journey that begins with Siddhartha Gautama. You probably know him as the Buddha.
Ah, yes. The Buddha. His story is where it all began.
What I find intriguing is the prophecy surrounding his birth. Just imagine being told as a newborn, you're destined for greatness, either as a powerful ruler or a spiritual leader.
Wow. Talk of a life-altering prediction. It's as if fate had a plan in store for Siddhartha, even before he took his first breath.
It really makes you wonder, would he have chosen a different path if not for that early prophecy?
It's a question that has resonated throughout Buddhist history. Did the prophecy shape Siddhartha's destiny, or did it merely give voice to a path he was always meant to follow? It's a fascinating thought experiment, isn't it?
Absolutely. But let's look at the events that set him on his spiritual quest. Despite living a life of privilege, Siddhartha was deeply troubled by what are known as the four sights.
Ah, the four sights. They're pivotal moments in the Buddha's journey. It's almost as if a veil was lifted from his eyes, revealing the harsh realities of life he had been sheltered from.
The first three sights he encounters an old man, a sick man, and a dead man really drove home the inevitability of suffering.
Exactly. These encounters forced Siddhartha to confront the universality of aging, illness, and death. They shattered the illusion of permanence and exposed the fragility of life, something we all grapple with, even today.
And then that final sight, an ascetic seeking spiritual liberation from the cycle of suffering. It's like that encounter sparked something within Siddhartha, pushing him towards a new path.
It's almost as if the ascetic represented a potential solution to the problem that the first three sights had so vividly presented.
And that's when he decides to dedicate himself to finding a way out of suffering. He studies under various gurus, even embraces extreme asceticism. Did you know the excerpt mentions he lived on practically nothing, just a single grain of rice a day?
It's hard to fathom such unwavering commitment. But that just highlights Siddhartha's relentless pursuit of truth. He was willing to endure incredible hardship to understand the nature of suffering and discover a path to liberation.
It's an incredible testament to his dedication, and it ultimately leads him to that pivotal moment meditating beneath the Bodhi tree. After a night of deep contemplation, he attains enlightenment, becoming the awakened one, the Buddha.
Imagine that feeling. Waking up to the true nature of reality, free from the illusions and attachments that bind us to suffering. That's the state of being Buddha. It's a profound awakening, not just for Siddhartha, but for all humankind.
It's almost as if his personal journey blossomed into a universal message. He transitioned from a prince seeking answers into the Buddha, offering a path for others seeking the same profound awakening.
Absolutely. And his teachings have resonated across cultures and centuries, offering solace, wisdom, and a path to inner peace for countless individuals.
Which begs the question, if he could make such a transformation, could we tap into that potential within ourselves as well? But we'll delve deeper into that a bit later. So the Buddha achieves enlightenment, becoming this beacon of wisdom. But I imagine people were curious, like, okay, what did he learn exactly? How did those teachings evolve into these different branches of Buddhism we hear about today?
You've hit on a key point. It's not a monolith, Think of it like different schools of thought, each offering their own interpretation and emphasis within the broader framework of the Buddha's teachings.
Like different lenses through which people connect with the same core message?
Exactly. It's like how a musical genre might have subgenres, right? You've got your jazz, your blues, your funk, all rooted in that same musical language, but each with its unique flavor. Buddhism, too, has seen different schools of thought emerge over the centuries. Today, we'll focus on two prominent ones, Theravada and Mahayana.
Theravada. That one rings a bell. It's often referred to as the way of the elders, right?
Got it. It emphasizes individual enlightenment and a close adherence to the Pali Canon.
Pali Canon. Refresh my memory on that one.
Sure thing. It's also known as the Tripitaka, basically the earliest recorded Buddhist scriptures. Think of it as a three-part library.
A library. I like that analogy. What kind of knowledge are we checking out from each section?
First up, we've got the sutras, which are like transcripts of the Buddha's sermons and dialogues, direct teachings, raw and unfiltered. Then there's the Vinaya. That one outlines the guidelines for a monastic life, kind of like a rule book for monks and nuns.
So the Vinaya provides the structure and discipline for those choosing that path. Makes sense. What about the third section of our library?
That's where things get really interesting. The Abhidharma, a collection of philosophical interpretations and analyses of the Buddhist teachings. Think of it like diving deep into the nuances, the deeper meanings behind the teachings.
So if the sutras are like listening to the Buddha speak, and the Vinaya is the guidebook for living as a monk or nun, the Abhidharma is for the philosophy nerds who really want to unpack it all.
You could say that. It's for those who want to explore the more intellectual and psychological aspects of Buddhism.
I love that. This library analogy really paints a picture. But let's bring it back to Theravada. We've got the Pali Canon as a core text. How about geographically? Where did this branch of Buddhism primarily take root?
Good question. Looking at this map from the source material, it's pretty clear Theravada predominantly flourished in Southeast Asian countries like Thailand, Sri Lanka, Myanmar, places where those early Buddhist communities spread from India.
It's like tracing the branches of a tree back to its roots. Okay, that's Theravada. Now what about Mahayana Buddhism? What sets it apart?
Mahayana, meaning the great vehicle, takes a slightly different approach. Instead of focusing solely on individual enlightenment, it emphasizes the Bodhisattva path.
The Bodhisattva path, that one's about compassion, right?
Absolutely. It's about striving to achieve enlightenment not just for oneself, but for the benefit of all beings. A profound expression of compassion and selflessness.
It's like extending a hand to help others cross the river, even as you're working towards reaching the other shore yourself.
Exactly. And in terms of scriptures, Mahayana doesn't limit itself to the Pali Canon. It embraces a wider range of texts, incorporating new teachings and practices that have emerged over time.
So while both branches have their roots in the Buddhist teachings, they offer distinct paths. Theravada, with its focus on individual liberation through meditation and study, and Mahayana with its emphasis on compassion and helping all beings achieve enlightenment.
Precisely. Different expressions of the same core principles. Now, geographically, Mahayana took a different route than Theravada. If you look at the map again, you'll see it spread primarily throughout East Asia, China, Korea, Vietnam, Japan.
Fascinating how they blossomed in different parts of the world, each shaping and being shaped by the cultures they encountered. Okay, so we've got these two prominent branches. But before we get lost in the leaves, let's circle back to the roots. We've mentioned the Buddhist teachings a lot specifically. What are those core principles that form the bedrock of both branches? We've covered a lot of ground, haven't we? Exploring different branches, different interpretations, but at the heart of it all lies the Buddha's core teachings.
Absolutely. And those core teachings are often encapsulated in what's known as the Four Noble Truths.
The Four Noble Truths. They always make me think of like a doctor diagnosing an illness and then prescribing a cure.
That's a great way to put it. The first noble truth acknowledges the reality of suffering. It calls it dukkha.
Dukkha, right. And that doesn't necessarily mean just physical pain.
Right. No, not at all. It encompasses all forms of suffering. Physical, emotional, even that existential dissatisfaction we might feel sometimes. The Buddha's insight was that suffering is a universal part of the human experience.
So it's recognizing that suffering exists. We can't just wish it away. But what about the cause of the suffering? That's where the second noble truth comes in, right?
Exactly. The second noble truth points to tanha, craving, or attachment, as the root cause of our suffering. It's that clinging to things, to people, to ideas, as if they could provide us with lasting happiness.
It's like we're chasing after these fleeting moments of pleasure or satisfaction, only to be met with disappointment when they inevitably fade away. So if attachment is the problem, is detachment the solution? Is that what the third noble truth is all about?
In essence, yes. The third noble truth states that suffering can be overcome. It's the realization that true liberation comes from releasing those attachments, from recognizing that true happiness isn't found in external things.
So it's not about renouncing the world or living a life devoid of pleasure. It's more about shifting our relationship to those things, right?
Exactly. It's about finding a sense of contentment and peace within ourselves that isn't dependent on external circumstances. Which leads us to the fourth noble truth, the path to achieving this liberation.
The path, that's where the famous Eightfold Path comes in. It's like, okay, we know suffering exists, we know attachment is the cause, we know there's a way out. Now, how do we actually get there?
Precisely. The fourth noble truth reveals the path to overcoming suffering, the Eightfold Path. It's often described as a set of 8 interconnected principles that, when cultivated together, lead to liberation.
8 principles, all interconnected. It makes me think of a spider web, each strand connected to the others, creating this intricate and beautiful structure.
I love that analogy. And those 8 principles are right understanding, right thought, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration. Each one building upon the other.
It's like a holistic approach to life, encompassing wisdom, ethical conduct, and mental discipline. Not just meditating on a mountaintop, but really integrating these principles into our everyday lives.
Absolutely. And that's where the 3 jewels come in. The Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha.
Ah, yes. 3 jewels, the guiding lights on this path. So we've got the Buddha as our teacher and guide, the Dharma as his teachings, but remind us again, what about the Sangha?
The Sangha is the community of fellow practitioners. It's recognizing that we're not alone on this journey. We can draw support, inspiration, and guidance from others who are also walking this path.
It's like we're all in this together, supporting each other along the way. So we've got these core principles, these guiding lights. It's a rich tapestry of philosophy and practice. But before we wrap up, I think it's important to address a couple of common misconceptions about Buddhism. One I hear a lot is that all Buddhists are vegetarian.
It's a common misconception. While vegetarianism is encouraged in line with the principle of non-harming, it's not a strict requirement across all Buddhist traditions. There's definitely room for individual interpretation and adaptation based on cultural context.
That makes sense. So it's more about cultivating awareness and compassion in our choices rather than adhering to rigid dietary rules. And another one that often comes up is the idea of worshiping the Buddha.
Ah, yes. That's a crucial distinction. Buddhists don't worship the Buddha as a deity. He's revered as a teacher, a guide, someone who showed us a path to enlightenment.
So it's not about blind faith or devotion. It's about actively engaging with his teachings, applying them to our own lives, and walking that path ourselves. It's a journey of self-discovery and liberation. Well, folks, there you have it. We've journeyed through the origins of Buddhism, explored its core principles and practices, and even debunked a few common misconceptions along the way. It's a tradition that emphasizes self-reflection, ethical conduct, and the cultivation of inner peace. And even if you don't identify as a Buddhist, there's so much wisdom and practical guidance to be found in its teachings.
Absolutely. Whether it's through mindfulness, meditation, or simply reflecting on the 4 noble truths, Buddhism offers tools for navigating the complexities of life with greater awareness, compassion, and peace.
So as you go about your day, why not take a moment to reflect on what we've discussed? See if any of these principles resonate with you. You might be surprised at the insights you uncover. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep diving deep.